I'm going to be the head of my household again. And so I'm not going to be circumvented in that. And so if everybody's willing to conform to patriarchy again, I guess, because I've been fighting to make everybody happy.
Ironically, Janelle did sign up for patriarchy. When her and I made an agreement that she would come into the family, she agreed wholeheartedly that she would run her will into mine because I had to be the head of the family. And she made that agreement with me.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Friday, February 16th, 2024, and I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. So last night on ABC, there was a new special about Warren Jeffs and the FLDS. And if you're brand new to the story on Warren Jeffs, it probably would have been super exciting because you would have heard all the details about the backstory of Warren's life. If you know the story and have heard the story, it's sort of a rehashing of the background of what had been happening, everything through his trial, and then very later at the very end going into some of his premonitions and revelations for current day FLDS life. And in the series, or in the special, Kristen Decker, who is a author of 50 Years in Polygamy, daughter of Owen Allred, who was the prophet of the Apostolic United Brethren for decades, and now an advocate and an advocate for apostates of the AUB and other fundamentalists, was viewed and looked to as an expert for her understanding on Mormon fundamentalism and the woman's experience. And I was thinking about how brave Kristen is and how for years she has been utilizing her voice to help dispel the rumors and all of the dishonest commentary that has come from the Sister Wives show, and has tried to set the record straight on so many of the lies that have come off the show. And Kristen actually appeared in an episode in season 6 where she was viewed as dangerous. Christine made a whole dramatic display where she acted like her aunt was unsafe, like her aunt was going to attack her family. And in all honesty, the way that Kristen was portrayed, last year I did an interview with her, and she talked a lot about how she felt a lot of almost PTSD from the way that she was treated on the show, how producers treated her, and how people that had been deeply hurt by these groups they left the show and left the experience feeling very invalidated. So naturally, when the show started to get combustible and blown up, I would have thought that the show would have started to get a little bit more honest about what it is that they were promoting. And while we're starting to see a few more bits and pieces from the wives that have left about the family, there's still a lot of fog that they have to come out of. And today I was actually talking to Kristen about that, and she was saying that when she first left the group, it took her years to unravel all of the deception and all of the brainwashing that she had gone through her whole life, and that it might take the women that have currently left Kody to get to years, maybe 5-10 years to understand the gravity of what they've been involved with and potentially the people in their lives that they've caused harm to. And for those of you that believe that the show has been harmless, it hasn't. It hasn't been harmless by any means. The show's notoriety helped to decriminalize polygamy in the state of Utah. It was also used as a vehicle to promote people on the show that were not the best human beings and that had cases against them in court relating to their wives, men that had been terrible to their families, and really diminishing the truth about the Apostolic United Brethren and trying to make the AUB appear to be less harmful than the FLDS, when the truth is it's not less harmful than the FLDS. It's just different. Each group within fundamentalism, they're all considered FLDS, but one group, Warren Jeffs' group, actually coins the term FLDS as their own. But they're all considered fundamentalists of the Latter-day Saints Church. They aren't affiliated with the mainstream church, but it's all sprung off of the original teachings of Joseph Smith and the following prophets. So with that being said, I was thinking about how, and having a conversation with her today about how we were talking about how a couple years ago she was supposed to testify in court in a case related to Kody Brown's friend, Kyle Henderson. Kyle Henderson had been arrested for DV against his wife, Nicole, and he was facing at the time, I believe, 6 felonies. He ended up doing a plea, like a Alford plea, where he didn't plead guilty, but he admitted that there was enough evidence to convict him, and he took a plea and got like 2 misdemeanors. The drawn out process sort of came to a boiling point when as they were preparing for trial, the state notified the defense about who their witnesses were. And they issued they put a motion in for expert witness testimony for Kristen Decker. And in retaliation to Kristen Decker's expert testimony, Kody Brown was brought in by Kyle's attorney, Mark Shurtleff, who's currently parading around on Secrets of Polygamy like he actually cares about what happens to people in polygamy because he's defending Kyle. It's gross. And anyways, he was a former attorney general, by the way, and he's defending a polygamist. It's just, and don't even get me started. So Kody retaliated and Kyle retaliated against Kristen by filing a motion where Kody was going to perjure himself and aid and abet in a cover-up. So let's dive into the topic of Kody's attempted perjury and alleged attempted cover-up and attempt to silence Kristen. Before you do, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click on the bell so you never miss a video. This story actually didn't make it really past Utah. The coverage of this case didn't really make it outside the walls of Utah. And for some reason, the wider media, when this was all going on, ignored it. They ignored Kody's involvement. They ignored Kody's response. They actually ignored what Kody was willing to do for his friend. And I don't know if this was a push by TLC to make sure that it didn't get out into the public, but what Kody was willing to do is no different than what Jim Bob Duggar had done for his son, Josh. Now, Kyle was not accused of the things that Josh did, but the severity of what Kyle was accused of, I would say physically would be, they're both monsters, in my opinion. So Kristen was going to come into this as an expert witness to help the jury understand the complexities of what it's like to be a woman in the AUB and what kind of rights they have and the structure of the group. And so in court, they filed a motion for expert witness. It was a supplemental notice, and it said that Miss Decker is a consultant and volunteer with Holding Out Hope, I think they meant chapter, help, Utah chapter regarding individuals living within and transitioning from polygamous organizations in Utah. Ms. Decker works with many persons in polygamous relationships, members of polygamous organizations, on a regular basis as a part of her affiliation with Holding Out Hope for personal works and family relationships. Ms. Decker is also a former member of the same polygamous sect, the Apostolic United Brethren, as defendant Mitchell Henderson and many of the witnesses the state anticipates to be called at the defendant's trial. Ms. Decker is the author of numerous articles and 2 books regarding polygamy organizations in Utah, including the AUB. Ms. Decker also has been given numerous lectures regarding the internal workings and social structure of the AUB and her own experiences in leaving the AUB and polygamy. The state anticipates her testimony will likely include an explanation of the religious structure of the AUB, social structure of the AUB, beliefs of the AUB, how difficult it is for a wife in plural marriage to leave the AUB, the effort typically made by AUB members to prevent persons from leaving the AUB, efforts typically made by AUB members to prevent persons from talking about what happens within the AUB, and the efforts typically made by AUB members to prevent persons from talking about DV and the treatment of wives within the AUB. Ms. Decker will also testify regarding the patriarchal nature of the AUB and the lines of authority taught within the AUB, and the subservient role of women within the AUB. Ms. Decker will also explain the obligations of loyalty and obedience required by a member of the AUB, including covering for DV and control of women occurring within the AUB. The state anticipates Ms. Decker will testify as an expert in this case in chief to help explain the religious, social, and personal pressures defendants use to coerce and control the alleged victim during the alleged cycle of DV. This expert will also be used as a rebuttal expert regarding the bias, prejudice, or any motive to misrepresent as impeachment under Rule 608 regarding testimony of defendant and other anticipated defense witnesses affiliated with the AUB. Ms. Decker is available to cooperatively consult with the opposing party upon reasonable notice and request state's counsel. So this was entered as her formal report as a witness, and it was sent to the court. So she was going to explain why, because at this part of the trial was that Kyle was accused of intimidating his children, witness intimidation, to make them testify in his behalf to help him cover up for what he had done. And eventually they just ended up doing a plea deal, like I said, and so he didn't have to go to trial. But the case involved severe intimidation by the witnesses and the kids basically calling their mom a liar and developing different stories about what had happened to her and what caused the injuries. And it was just very ugly. So Kristen was going to come and sort of lift this veil of this, what the AUB had been saying for years, that there was no patriarchy, that this was all consensual, that women are not controlled. And that was her role here. She was coming in as an expert. Well, as rebuttal to that, the defendant decided that Kody Brown was going to insert himself. So because Kristen was a vocal opponent of the AUB, Kody decided that he would be a defense witness and rebut anything that Kristen said. So Kody Brown was willing to perjure himself. And I want to share with you what he was going to testify to if called by the defense, and how this is perjury and he would have been helping to cover up for his friend. Mr. Brown is the patriarch of the reality show Sister Wives and is self-employed as an advertising salesman who previously lived in Lehi, Utah, but has since moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. Kody is part of a polygamous family. He has 4 wives and 18 children, and the state's expert witness, Kristen Deckert, has been featured on Sister Wives show. Mr. Brown knows Miss Decker very well, and his wife, Christine, is the niece of Miss Decker. Mr. Brown is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Becoming Sister Wives, and has been interviewed numerous times about polygamy. So you notice in Kristen's expert witness, they explained that she had written many articles, written 2 books, and had been a lecturer and done all kinds of work on the intricacies of the culture of women, for women inside of polygamy. And at no place did she indicate who she was as far as in relationship to the plaintiff or the defendant. But in Kody's case, he's posturing to her as a way to, in my opinion, intimidate that, yes, we know her. That's Christine's aunt. And I'm the one that has the #1 New York Times bestseller. It's like, even in his expert testimony, he has to be better than her. That's just my opinion. And this is so typical of the men in this culture. It says, like the state's expert witnesses, Kristen Decker, Mr. Brown is also a former member of the same polygamous sect, the AUB, as the defendant, and has known the defendant and his family for decades. He was a raised member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and served an LDS mission for his church. Therefore, Mr. Brown also is not only knowledgeable about the doctrines, practices, and internal workings and social structure of the LDS Church, but also the AUB and other fundamentalist polygamist sects and independents as well. The defendant anticipates Mr. Brown's testimony will likely include the explanation of the religious and social structure and belief of the AUB compared with the LDS Church, how it is not difficult for husbands, wives, or children in plural marriage families to leave the AUB, and the fact that DV does not occur more frequently than in non-polygamous families in general, even in traditional mainstream LDS families. Everything about that is 100% false. The DV is highly elevated in these groups compared to other families. Everything, all studies they've done on polygamy has shown that it's an increased violence towards women. And it says, his other part here is the truth regarding the so-called patriarchal nature of the AUB, the lines of authority taught within the AUB, and that women are not subservient, that there are not mandates of loyalty and obedience to be a member of the AUB or requirements that adherents and members cover for DV and control of women within the AUB. It's weird that he would say there's no demands for loyalty and obedience to be a member, and yet in his own family, he was demanding Janelle to be obedient and loyal to him, and demanding that his kids and his wives be obedient and loyal to him. And he says so-called patriarchal nature, but yet a couple seasons ago, he said that he was going to return his family to patriarchy. And when he introduced himself as an expert, he said he is the patriarch. So he was willing to say that there was no patriarchal structure and there's no lines of authority. He was willing to perjure himself, and then in the same breath, he was also willing to say that they don't cover for each other, while he's also trying to cover for Kyle. It also says the defendant anticipates Mr. Brown will rebut the state experts, Ms. Decker's expected testimony that explains the religious and social and personal pressures the defendant allegedly used to coerce and control the alleged victim during the alleged cycle of DV. This expert will also be used as a rebuttal against Ms. Decker regarding any claim by the state of bias, prejudice, or any motive to misrepresent and impeach the defendant, a witness, under Rule 608. So he was willing to help cover for his friend, perjure that there was no such thing as a patriarchal structure, perjure himself and say that there was no coercion or control, or claim that there was no way that he tried to keep Nicole there. Even though on the show he was pitching a fit when his wives were going out of bounds and not doing what he wanted and demanding patriarchy, and then even saying that when Janelle joined the family, she agreed to patriarchy and agreed to run her will to his, meaning he had final say, which would mean that when a woman joins a family, the man has control. In his interview with Mormon Discussions, Kody went as far at one point as to say that women have to be almost browbeaten and coerced to join these cultures because they're given the promise of exaltation, and which means that they would have the opportunity to be in eternity with their family. But a man gets to just have other wives, so he doesn't have to be coerced to join. So can you really have consent when there's coercion involved? And he has admitted that the leaders are patriarchal in structure. He has admitted they are obsessed with power. He has admitted that the men in these groups, some of them only join because they want to have multiple partners for sex. Kody was going to go on the stand, not just to defend and help cover up for Kyle and to perjure himself and do this, but this was also a tactic of intimidation towards a woman from the AUB that had left, to say, like, you are out, but you still don't have power in this world. And I'm going to make you look stupid, and I'm going to make you look like a fool, and I'm going to rebut everything that you say. He was willing to cover up for his friend. And then today, years later, after saying there is no patriarchy, he's on the show saying that he is the patriarch. It floors me that the gravity of this case and Kody's willingness to insert himself, and I was told that he wanted to do this because it would have been a part of the show, and they were gonna like make it look like Kody was like the big shot. It was gonna be like a storyline. Obviously, he never had to testify, and they did the Alford plea, but a couple years later, Kyle shows up on the show, and they just talk about how Nicole left the family, and they don't say why. They just say that she was unhappy, and it was just a shame that it didn't work out. And then Janelle said, I would never have left my husband. I could never leave. And the women almost shamed her for leaving a situation that was unhealthy for her. So when I say that there's real victims here that have been harmed by the show, Nicole Van Tassel Henderson was a victim of the show. Even though his criminal case has been expunged now and like they have removed these from his record, he still has this still happened. There are court documents that says this. Just because it's not a factor in his criminal record today doesn't mean it didn't happen. And even today, while they're going through their divorce, even though he did all of those things, Kyle was able to use all of his pull within the AUB and all of his manipulative tactics to find a way to still be, after having a DV charge, a protective order against him, in their divorce, he has custody of the kids now because she was left so damaged and so completely gaslit and railroaded and abused that she fell into substance abuse and drank and ended up with multiple DUIs, and she went into recovery and she became sober, and she has several years of sobriety under her belt, but apparently that's not enough for the judge because Utah doesn't care about women. They wouldn't allow anything into the divorce about polygamy. They fought it tooth and nail, and you know who his attorney was? Mark Shirtleaf. So Mark, who was the attorney general that covered up for Kody, is helping Kyle cover it up, is leaving kids with Kyle despite Kyle's history of DV and his involvement in a cult. And Nicole, who is out and trying to rebuild her life, is left picking up the pieces, dealing with her recovery, and trying to be a good mother and trying to give her kids an opportunity to have a life outside of the cult. And it's an uphill battle. So Kody's attempted cover-up never made it to the mainstream. His attempted perjury never made it to the mainstream. And I feel like if this had become more prominent news, the backlash for Kody getting himself involved in such a violent case and defending that abuser would have caused the show to be canceled. But yet somehow TLC went on with the show. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.